Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch, and I thought that I would start this video with some of the chickens and of course my boy. But today's video is actually going to be about trellising, and I always call it trellising. I don't think that's an actual word, but if that happens to come out during the video, just know it's something because I say it so many times and I like putting I on the end of everything. But anyways, I wanted to show you the main trellis that I use and talk about a couple different options for trellising. And I think that a lot of when you're selecting what kind of trellis to use, I think there's several things to take into consideration. And one of those is, what do you have already? Because honestly, a lot of stuff will work. And I've definitely used a lot of untraditional trellising methods, when I was first starting out. And then I used some more specific methods for trellising, including what I'm going to show today, and like more specialized. But now as I've grown, I've kind of shifted more into a trellis that kind of works for the majority of things. And so that's kind of my trellis journey. And then of course, well, I guess the first step was growing everything that needed trellis without a trellis and then having it go everywhere, including my very first year of tomatoes. I had like 12-foot tomato vines just sprawling across the ground. And actually kind of worked well, but space inefficient, of course. But anyways, say goodbye to, bye boys. Oh, you're not gonna do it? Who's mama's turkeys? Oh, who's moody? I think they're getting jealous of each other. And I'm gonna show you the trellis I just put up and then other options for trellising. So come with me. Okay, so what I'm about to show you is, oh, now you're talkative? What I'm about to show you is the trellis that I use most frequently. And I have used this for beans, peas, tomatoes, and I'll basically, well, I think that's pretty much it. And I plan to potentially use it for squash, but a different format. But as you can see behind me, there are two. And also, sorry, I thought about building them on camera, but as many of you know, I work with special needs kids and like teaching farming and gardening and stuff like that. And so I build it with them, and I would never film them. And so I don't have a during, but I have a bunch of other trellis to put up. So, but anyways, I wanted to get the video out because the one thing, I guess I should have started the video with this. The one thing you really want to do is to get your trellis up before you need it. And I can say that from experience. Even last year, for those of you that remember the garden tours, I started off really strong with trellising the tomatoes. And then I didn't do such a great job of, life gets busy, everything gets chaotic, the sun warms up, the days are longer, and, your plants are growing. And even if you still get in, like, kind of quote unquote in time, it's hard to manipulate like the tomato plants or whatever. And I'm more comfortable with like moving them. But I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to, if you're bending your tomato plant, like that can be really scary, especially if you only have a couple or something like that. So I will say this, and I've said it probably like 20 times in all of my videos, but just a high recommendation is to get your trellis in beforehand. If you have kind of a garden plan or whatnot, and you know where you're going to have like tomatoes, peas, beans, anything that's vining, flowers, sweet peas, a lot of things benefit from additional support, just however you want to run your garden. But get it up initially. Right now there's not too much to do as far as outside and stuff like that. It's a great time to get the trellis up. So this is the cattle panel trellis, and it's pretty easy, especially for me because I have a lot of cattle panels lying around. Now you may be wondering, what is a cattle panel? It's exactly what you see here. I've heard, well, hog panels are a little bit, that sometimes they call them hog panels, but those have smaller sizes. But basically it's 4 feet by 8 feet, and I'll stand next to it for size. And so I don't know what they go for at the store. When I was purchasing them, I think they were like $14 now. I don't know. They're like probably $380 a piece now. No, I'm kidding, but kind of. I don't know what they go for anymore. The great thing about these, I've used a nylon netting that's similar in the box shape of the trellis, and that works really well, but it doesn't last forever. This stuff is, I don't know, this has been solidly outside for at least 4 years, you know, and all the snow and the wind and the rain and the heat and the sun and all that stuff. It's built for outside and it's nice and sturdy. I don't know the price. They also sell it in 16 foot lengths. And those are the ones, if you're like me and you love those like trellis arbor things, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's actually something I want to do with my winter squash this year. If I don't run out of time, it's going to be really magical, or at least I think in my head. But I plan to do for I have where the chickens are now in the chicken garden adjacent to the chicken run. They're clearing it right now, and I'm going to grow all of my winter squash interplanted with a bunch of mammoth sunflowers, which are the really big ones that you can use for sunflower seeds, not like cut stem ones. Anywho, and I'm going to try in a portion of that to do like a squash like tunnel kind of thing. I don't know how it's going to work out though. I did see it on Instagram and I absolutely fell in love, and that gal did an amazing job. I don't remember her name. It was just in passing. I was like scrolling through, but so I want to try that as well, but I don't know the specifics of it. But basically it's the same thing, because that stuff is bendable. And when you get the longer ones, if you have a truck, it's easier to pick it up because you can actually bend it, not in half exactly, but like bend at an angle, and it'll fit in the back of your truck. I surprisingly don't have a truck, and I have this old SUV that does me really well. So I get the smaller sizes just because it's easier to work with. So I've got 2 of those, as you can see. And then you see those green lines on both sides of them. And I'll bring the camera up and show you closer when I'm done explaining. But those are what's called U-posts. So when you're at a farm store, if you already know this, sorry, but if you don't, when you're at a farm store, there's 2 different types of posts. Well, I guess there's 3 technically. There's like the wooden post that my camera is on. I would take it down, but I'll show it later. But then there's what's called a T-post and a U-post. So a T-post is going to be exceptionally sturdy, and that may be something that you want to use, especially if you have like permanent beds where you're like a smaller garden area, and that way you can set it and forget it. Those ones, I think they have to be pulled out, but like they're not so easy to get in. And then U-posts are kind of the similar thing, but they're not as sturdy, but they're still sturdy enough. So I use U-posts, and I'll show you, but it literally, a T-post like literally looks like a T, and a U-post literally looks like a U. And when I first started putting these in, because I can pull them out of the ground, like all of these ones were in the front people garden the previous year for tomatoes. These are going to be snow peas here, and then also the next row back, because there'll be 2 sets of these. There's only 1 up now. But initially I would put them in, I would use either a rock or a hammer to kind of hammer them in. But now I've got an actual, what's it called? Post slammer or whatever. It's like a heavy metal thing, and you like put it on top and like slam it down, and it does a lot of the work for you, but you'll still have some soreness. And then the last ingredient in our trellis are, how did I just forget the word? That's terrible. Zip ties. I use zip ties for everything. If you're having it where it's going to be a permanent thing, you can obviously use rope or anything like that. There's UV resistant zip ties, which will hold up better, because obviously the trellises, they'll get really heavy, and so you want it to support. So this is kind of my setup, my preferred all-around trellis that I use for everything. And you can obviously put the cattle panel on the U-post, taller or higher depending. To recap on price, I don't know what zip ties are, like $5-10 for like a bag of like 100 or something. And then the cattle panel is, I believe, like $15-ish. I haven't priced them this year though, so I don't know. Someone can fill that in the comments down below, but I think about $15 each. And then the U-posts, I think those are like a couple bucks, like $1 or $2 for each one. I'm not exactly sure on that either, because I've had mine for a long time. So I'm gonna bring you closer and give you a better view of what the trellis looks like and how I plan to use it. And then I'll show you a different style that I utilize in the greenhouse. So just one moment. Okay, so this is the garden. Last year, this is where the corn was. And so I leave the roots in place and just cut it off. So all those things that you see, those were corn. The Canadian thistle's starting to pop up through there. I'll need to do weeding. But let's move on to our trellis. So as you can see, there's 2 of them. And I have here, you can see the zip ties that hold it together, very secure. No farm or garden is complete without zip ties. These are those U-posts I was talking about. You see how the shape is kind of a U? Well, that one doesn't look very U-ish, but you get what I'm saying. And then those just go into the ground. It's still movable, like it's not, you know, an ultra permanent thing. I mean, I could use it for years on end with that. And I also plan to secure it a little better. Like I said, it was just built last week, but that's basically the concept. I'm going to do the same thing over in this bed. I just have to finish clearing it, like this area over here, because it looks hideous. But as you can see, this one, this U-post, or this cattle panel is a little bent. I don't know if you can see it there, but the same exact thing. Get a little wider view here. There you go. And so what I'll do is I'll plant all my peas down along here, and you can do the same thing with tomatoes and whatnot. The peas will just climb up the trellis without any problem. Excuse me, sorry, still getting over being sick. With tomatoes, you would actually like feed the tomato plant like through here, through the different things in the branches to help hold it up. I like other trellis methods for tomatoes a little bit better, but honestly, I found this to be the easiest and most versatile. So I will be putting some of these in the greenhouse as well. But I'll take you in the greenhouse and show you some other stuff that I've used for trellising. Okay, so hi boys. We're really close to the turkeys, so you might hear them a little bit more. So in this greenhouse, I'm still working on clearing it out from the previous season and get some early spring seeds in here. But I utilized 2 different types of trellis. I meant to trellis the cucumbers. I did not get around to it, and so I just had them trailing out into this wide walkway, which actually worked out pretty well. I made this wheelbarrow wide, and then just in the height of summer, just kind of tiptoed through so I didn't ruin anything. But I grew indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. And if you don't know what those are, you do want to pay attention to that, because that will depend on what kind of trellis you use. Basically, determinate tomatoes, think of like hippish high. Like they vary. There's like some semi-dwarf or dwarf ones that grow about to like your knee, or, you know, I've seen them grow like, especially in the South with a whole lot of like fertilizer or something, grow like chest height or something like that. Depends on the variety and the climate and all kinds of other factors. But effectively, you're generally looking at the size is predetermined, determinate, and then they fruit all at once. With your indeterminate tomatoes, they could theoretically grow for years. Now in our area, they will not make it through the winter, and so they're grown as annuals. But like in Southern California and stuff, I've seen where they kind of like resemble a tree a little bit, and they'll grow year after year, the same plant, and it'll be, you know, like, I don't know, 2 like stories tall or something like that, like exhibition style. But you want to know which kind you have, so that way you know the best way to trellis it. If you have a determinate, this is last year's plant. I know turkeys. So obviously last year's plant, kind of. And this is, you see them at the garden stores all the time. Sometimes they're in bright colors. I don't know if you can see it, but it's basically a circle or a couple circles and a couple stakes that go into the ground. And so those are excellent for, that's hip height about, once you push it in maybe a little lower. And so that's for determinate. Even still, you might overflow, but it helps give a pretty good stand to the tomatoes, especially when they come into fruit, because the fruits are hopefully heavy because there's lots of them. The other thing I do, and you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but I really need to get a stepping stone here. I don't know if you can see like these strings or whatever. Those I use, they're attached obviously to the top. You see the metal-ish areas up there? And so that's the purpose. This greenhouse I can hang from the greenhouse and put like a little swing thing, yoga swing in here. But what I do is I attach them to the bottom of the tomato plant, of an indeterminate tomato plant. Remember, the cage was for determinate, higher trellis is for indeterminate. And then I would just wind till a certain point, till I got too busy, honestly. But I would try to stay up on winding the tomato plant around it, and it'll continue to grow up. When you're using that method, you have to make sure that you are pruning, and pruning well, and pruning to that central or double leader, meaning that you need to stay on top of it because the tomato wants to bush. That's its natural habit. So you're manually taking those off. If that sounds like something that you can't stay on top of or don't want to stay on top of, which I totally get, then what you want to do is utilize more of the original one I showed you, that cattle panel, because then if you miss one of the little, what are they called? I can't believe I'm blanking on that. One of the little side shoots or whatever, then and it's too big, or you just don't want to cut it off because it has flowers, because I understand that, then you can just start trellising that through. You want to give it a little more space, but ultimately there really isn't a bad way and there isn't like a perfect way. It's what fits with your garden and your style and how you want the finished product to look and how busy you are. Like I said, I have grown tomatoes without any trellis and they just kind of all spread out and did really well. I've also done cherry tomatoes interplanted with mammoth, which are the big ones, they've got huge stems, mammoth sunflowers, and just the sunflowers just helped hold them up, and they were a shorter, like semi-dwarf cherry tomato anyways. So, but they were not indeterminate. So lots of options here. I hope that I've given a little bit of a glimpse into what I use and kind of my trellising journey, if you will. I'd love to hear if you guys have any recommendations. I know there's a Florida weave that I've never tried. I definitely have thought about it, and maybe I will give it a go. I'm still finalizing the plans. I know where everything's gonna go, but still finalizing stuff. If you guys have a trellis method that you really love, I'd love if you shared it with me and everybody else in the comments. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you. I appreciate it. It helps support me. And if you want to give it a like, of course, I like that too. And I know my boys, they'll like it as well. But anyways, thank you for watching. Happy gardening. Have a great day. Bye.